Good afternoon, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Mikell. The city of Burlington is often ranked as one of the country's best places to live. A thriving art scene, physical beauty, year-round outdoor activities are all drawing points to the Queen City. Well, today we're going to learn about some of the city's darker historical deeds. We'll explore the new book, True Crime Stories of Burlington, Vermont, and the author Thea Lewis. This is Thea's sixth book with the History Press. Her previous titles, some of you're seeing on the screen, include Haunted Burlington, Wicked Vermont, and Lakeview Cemetery of Burlington. Thea is also the founder of Queen City Ghost Walk Tours, now in its 21st year. Thea, good afternoon. Thanks for being with us.
It's nice to be here.
I think you've been with us almost since the start of the 21st century with your tours and books.
I think so. I mean, thank you so much for inviting me back again
Well, because
and again.
it's always great. This is a book that features stories that go back in Burlington 150, 160 years, well into the 1800s. How do you learn about these things? How do you get the details?
Well, it's a wonderful thing to be in the city of Burlington because there are so many people who are great historians who have been a great resource to me. So a lot of the time it's contacts, but also there's a really robust history in our old local newspapers. I mean, the Burlington Free Press Archives and the Burlington Daily News.
The now defunct Burlington Daily News.
That's right, a
Yep.
very old paper here in the city of Burlington. And also I'm just a mad Googler, and I like to, between Google, Ancestry.com, all those things.
But you were also born in Burlington.
That's right.
You still live there today. These stories hit close to home. In fact, I know that one of them, in a case where you knew the murderer.
Not only knew the murderer, but the murderer was my niece's godmother, and I had known her since she was a teenager. Her life's tale was kind of a sad tale. She was an habitual offender who ended up murdering because of drugs.
Now, each of these, there's more than 24 stories in the book. They're each unique, but I learned that there have been at least 3 serial killers. I learned from you several years ago, one of them was Ted Bundy, but 3 serial killers have connections to the city of Burlington.
That's right, and even more, but people will recognize these names. Certainly H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer who attended the University of Vermont Medical School. And then, of course, Ted Bundy, who was at one point in time implicated in the Rita Curran murder. And then Israel Keyes, which will be fresh in a lot of people's memories.
That's the story involving a couple in Essex.
That's right, the Couriers.
Get into a little bit of detail. Who were the Couriers? One of the pictures from your book right there on the screen.
Yeah, the Couriers were a wonderful couple from Essex. They both were known as such responsible and kind individuals. They were involved with all kinds of hobbies and took care of their family. And when Israel Keyes came to town, a man who would actually travel to different places and plant these murder kits in order to be able to opportunistically take people's things and kill them. He crushed a lot of people's lives. They were well loved in the community.
It defines randomness. The
Yeah.
Couriers did not know him. They had
No.
no interaction. We live in a very safe place, and I want to be very clear about that. We've both grown up here. We haven't left.
That's right.
We've raised our families here. So these stories, part of what makes them engaging is that they're unique. That idea that, so again, Mr. Holmes, this is some connection. Well, I'll let you tell the story. Who is this young man here?
H.H. Holmes was a young man who came from Gilmantown, New Hampshire, moved to Burlington, Vermont as a young married man, and attended the medical school at Pomeroy Hall. The old building is still there on Main Street. And he ended up, as I say on my haunted tours, going to Chicago and making a name for himself. And he really did make an entire new name, from Mudgett to Holmes. He would engage in something called a dead man's shuffle, where back in those days, with no real mass communication, you could take out an insurance policy on a fictitious individual and later on provide a body. So we think that Holmes may have killed in excess of 200 people in his time.
And a lot of that was in Chicago, again, those connections to Vermont.
In Chicago, right.
For some of the older stories, again, going back to the 1800s, you support your storytelling with with images. They may not be the knife or the revolver used in it, but again, there's several examples in the book, and one of those involves a knife. What's the significance of this picture right here?
Well, that knife is an old example of a dirk knife, what's called a dirk knife, and that was a knife that was used in the disemboweling and eventual murder of a young man on Battery Street. In the chapter, The Habits of Local Nightbirds, which was a line from an old Burlington Daily News and Free Press article. These young men were carousing on Battery Street, which was the place to carouse back in the day, and came to no good end.
But in that case, if I'm remembering reading it correctly, he was not found guilty.
Well, the gentleman, yes, the gentleman, Mercier, Frank Mercier, was not found guilty. And one of the things that people will learn in the book that I found absolutely ridiculous was the police officers and also the people of the court and reporters of the time who weighed in. People don't realize that back in those days, there was no such thing as impartiality with a lot of the reporters. Everyone said, he's got such a honest face, he doesn't look guilty. And so if that's the test, not looking guilty, a lot of people would walk free these days.
Thea, you told me it took you a little over a year to write and research this book, and it was actually during the time that you were doing it that one of the cases in the book, it's right on the front cover, was the case of Rita Curran. It was solved while you were working on this book. It
was amazing to be sitting there and hear that the Burlington Police Department was going to be giving a press conference. I knew back in 2016 there had been talk of Rita Curran and new DNA evidence, but I had no idea that this would unspool as I was writing the chapter of a story that I had known about since way before I ever started writing books or had a ghost tour, or it was just so almost otherworldly to be sitting there and watching this finally solved.
And as you've been doing the research and telling these stories and the stuff you have in the book, what incredible advancements in police technology, and of course the Curran case, the Rita Curran case, and DNA on a cigarette butt is kind of the ultimate of a tool that 20, 30, 50 years ago didn't exist.
Yeah, I was intrigued to know that the detectives working on the case had to actually fly somebody to Washington, D.C. for the very early sort of DNA testing that they were doing at the time. It wasn't a question of being able to have a local lab and being able to find out right away. It was a process. Yeah.
So occasionally, thankfully, it's only very rarely, but occasionally the good guys turn out to be the bad guys. And you have one of those cases involving the Burlington Police Department.
I think that was such a sad case. The case of, it started off with two officers, Officer Adams and Officer Malloy, and this was an event that not only broke the fact of 5 different officers breaking into businesses at night and taking things wide open, but it was something that really changed the way the city looked at the Burlington Police Department, because a lot of the fellows who were stealing things at night were stealing things like baby formula and diapers because their salaries were so pitifully low, a fraction of the national average of what people were making at the time.
Those are not easy stories for a community, too. They do break trust. Searching my memory, I believe that case was the mid-'60s. Is that right, to put it in context?
The very early 60s, but it actually didn't really wrap up for several years and resulted in a new chief of police. And, at the time there was a mayor who was a very sort of by the books, my way or the highway, a very justice shall be served. He kind of ran people through the mill who really were not people who should have been implicated. It was just something that really just cast a pall over the entire city for quite a time.
I think the viewers are getting a sense there's many stories in the book that I'm familiar with, having been a reporter throughout the latter part of the 1980s, 1990s. So there's a story, one of the many in the book that I'm familiar with, based on some work I did in the 1980s about Vermont's death penalty. Yes. It involves Vermont's last death penalty case, which came in 1954.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the chapter I called The Last Meal.
That is The Last Meal. It's one of the last chapters of the book.
Yeah, and that concerns Donald DeMag, a guy who was a local person, lived in Burlington He had his home on North Street, and he committed a murder in the center of town. And then from there, he became an habitual offender. He was a young and powerfully built young man who escaped from prison
And
more
that's
than once.
really where he ended up getting the death sentence, is
That's
because
right.
he broke out of prison, committed another crime.
That's right.
Interesting footnote to that story is he's the last person executed, but he's not the last person sentenced to death in Vermont.
Right, now he's the last person executed. He and Francis Blair were the people who, well, as I say on my true crime tour in Burlington, the last butts to sit, as crude as it may sound, in the electric chair. The electric chair was considered cruel and unusual punishment, and they stopped using it, and it does exist at the Vermont Historical Society.
As we come near the end of the program, I also want to note, in addition to your busy life as an author, you're busy in your 21st or 22nd year with Queen City Ghost Walk tours. What do you have for folks this year?
Well, we've got the true crime tours on Thursday nights. We have got some wonderful tours that are, I would call, almost an all-ages tour. We recommend 8 and up, called Fright by Flashlight. It's a ghost investigation tour in one of our local cemeteries, beautiful Lakeview. And there's just something for everyone, I think.
And if you want to find out more, our director, Brock Sutterfield, has put the website on the screen. It's queencityghostwalk.com. Thea, quickly back to true crime. It's this Monday night. Tonight you'll be at Phoenix Books in Burlington. Folks want to stop in, get an autographed copy, buy a book, say hello to Thea. All of that is available, and that's tonight, correct?
That is tonight at Phoenix Books. I'll be there, and I hope to have a nice crowd there to tell some stories too.
Well, I've been speaking with author Thea Lewis about her new book. It's called True Crime Stories of Burlington, Vermont. You can find Thea's books online and at independent booksellers like Phoenix Books in Burlington and Essex. Once again, Thea, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Mikell, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit across the fence.